Okay, last night I watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. The narrative video I did on the origin story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles did very well, and it is apparent to me that many of you who watch my videos are interested and you like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Maybe you grew up on this cartoon. I grew up on a cartoon. I did not read the comic book. To be honest with you, that comic book came out when I was around 6 years old, and I was not collecting comic books at the time. I had no idea it was a thing. This was, for those of you who might be too young to understand this was before the internet, before social media. So unless you knew someone who was into comic books, or you went into a comic book shop, or maybe read about it in some entertainment magazine, you probably wouldn't have known that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a comic book, but it was a very successful comic book at that, which is what led to the cartoon series. Now, I went into this movie understanding the backstory of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, fully knowing the original backstory, the backstory we got in the cartoon, which wasn't crazy modified from the comic book. I mean, there was variations, but it wasn't like a complete abandonment of what you saw in the comic book. Now, I'm trying to get into, I don't want to say movie critique, because I don't want to watch movies for the sake of criticizing them. I really don't. So I'm trying to be more accurate with my critiques, but I don't want to approach movies watching them as a critic, because I just want to enjoy movies. But that doesn't mean that there aren't things about movies that I notice from a critical perspective. I think everyone will notice something about any given movie from a critical perspective. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Mutant Mayhem, this is what I think objectively. This is literally what I think objectively. If I was not a geek and I knew nothing about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, this movie, super enjoyable, crazy good. That's coming from, I've never seen or I don't know anything about the backstory, and I'm not that invested, which I think a lot of studios are planning on a normie audience. Geeks are a different ball game. I'm very familiar with the Turtles. I know a lot about their story, but I wanted to offer that objective opinion for several reasons, and you're going to see. Like I said, I'm going to try to be more accurate in these videos and my movie reviews and the information I cover. I won't always be super accurate. I'm just going to go ahead and say that right now, but I'm going to try. So we're on RottenTomatoes.com. The audience score for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is 90%. That is phenomenal. Super phenomenal. The tomato meter is 96%. So the critics said this movie was amazing, and the audience said this movie was awesome. So it was well loved. This movie was definitely well loved by audiences and by critics. Now, some may argue, and I've heard this argument made before, that these audience scores and critic scores can be paid for, and some studios do pay for them. I don't know that. I can't say one way or another. Would it shock me if that was the case? No, it wouldn't shock me at all. I mean, it would not shock me that a movie studio would pay for somebody to give a positive review to bolster the perception of their movie, and to get people to go into the movie theaters and watch this. Would not be surprised. There's a reason I'm doing this in this way, because I really do want to give as objective an opinion from a fan perspective of this movie as I possibly can. Critics loved it, audience loved it, according to Rotten Tomatoes. Now, does that mean, is this always accurate? Does this mean every movie that gets a good rating is good and every movie that gets a bad rating is bad? Clearly, it doesn't mean that. So now I look at the box office numbers. What did it make? So to date, domestically, it made $118 million. Internationally, it made approximately $62 million. Collectively, that works out to $180 million. Now, I am not a critic. I keep saying that because I'm going to mention things that have been said to me. I don't understand how much studios need to make on a movie versus what they put in. But from what I've been told, whatever they put into the movie, double that is typically what they want to make on revenue in the box office. Now, I don't know also, like, there were things clearly that were sold in addition with people going to the movie, right? All the different paraphernalia and t-shirts, hats, all of that good stuff that the movie studio probably capitalized on as well. I don't know. So I'm on Screen Rant, and Screen Rant gives the numbers for how much was put into this movie. Screen Rant says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem has a budget of around $70 million, although the exact figure is estimated to be somewhere between 70 and 80 million. The budget excludes printing and advertising costs, and while it may not seem like a huge budget in comparison to other big movies this year, it is a relative risk for the studio, with Dungeons and Dragons, Honor Among Thieves flopping at the box office and the mixed box office of Mission Impossible 7, a relatively big budget animated film, could prove to be a gamble. Alongside this, the limited success of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movies only adds to the film's pressure to perform. Now, I wanted to read all of that stuff to get, I guess that would be considered all the technical analysis of the movie out the way. According to Rotten Tomatoes, loved by audiences, loved by critics. According to Box Office Mojo, it made well north of double of what was put into the movie. According to everything I've been told, that's a good sign. Like I said, if I remove knowing the history of the Turtles, if I remove being very familiar with the cartoon growing up, this was great. But the problem is the way they sold April O'Neil in this movie. This will be a spoiler. If you've not seen the movie, you probably don't want to watch after this point. Again, this will be a spoiler. April O'Neil is I want to say she was like 16 or 17-year-old black girl going to high school that was writing for her school paper or something like that. I don't necessarily always have a problem with characters that are swapped, gender and race. Sometimes it fits the story. If it feels like it's done inorganically is when I'm just like, I don't know. And I'm not sure April O'Neil's character was switched organically. That was the issue I took with that. Personally, like I said, looking at all of the metrics, the movie appears to have done well. Again, I'm not a critic. Maybe those numbers are actually bad. If they are bad, comment under the video and let me know how much a movie is supposed to make. With that said, the backstory of the Turtles in this movie was completely changed around. It was not the same story at all. And I don't know if I like that. Now, I could deal with that somewhat if there was slight modifications in stories, because I understand some studios, they change stories to fit the big screen because it works better if done in a certain way. That I can get. I didn't like the way, if this seemed like something that was not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Although, like I said, two things can be true at the same time. You can dislike a movie because of things that were changed, but still see it's an enjoyable movie. And I'll give you an example of that. Excuse me. Ready Player One. I read the book. Ernest Cline, who wrote Ready Player One, is a magnificent author, and Ready Player One was a magnificent masterpiece of geekery. The movie, not so much, but it's not that the movie wasn't good. I was so familiar with the book, and the book was so good that for me, the movie just didn't hold up. Now, I know Ernest Cline himself had a hand in, if not, I believe he might have written the entire screenplay for the movie. So look, it's his creation. It's what he decided to do. He actually started off writing screenplays. None of his screenplays got picked up. And that's when he wrote Ready Player One, which is a masterpiece, and Armada, which is another masterpiece. And I cannot wait to get my hands on part 2 to that book. But this is kind of what I felt about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, if I had never seen the cartoons in the 80s, late 80s and early 90s, and if I had never known anything about the comic book and didn't know the origin story, this movie would have been great. So many things were changed that I thought to myself, why were all these changes made? What was the need to make these changes? Sometimes I think people feel like out of necessity, they have to make changes. Like, well, I got this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles gig I'm working on. I'm going to change the story just to spice it up. And I say that's not necessary. I say you can keep the story exactly the same. The way the story was originally, you would still be able to pull in old audiences. But here's the thing. You would have pulled in new and old audiences, I think, with the same volume. This is my guess, and I could be completely wrong. My guess is people like me who enjoyed Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon, in the late 80s, early 90s, heard about all the reviews of this particular movie, heard about April O'Neil's character, heard about the storyline changes, and there was no Shredder. Look, I get it. Sometimes you want to tell older stories and in a new and refreshing way. But man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with no Shredder, for me, didn't quite do it. And I think had they kept the story accurate to the original story, both from the comic book and the original series, and had there been a Shredder in this movie, I think they could have made a movie that would have made 400 or 500 million, probably even more than that, 600 million. I think it was actually possible. And I think they might have missed out on a larger audience. Now, again, I am not a cinematographer. I know nothing about the production of a movie. I'm speaking purely as a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This movie wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, which is why I did not go see it in a theater. That's another thing. You miss out when you change the storyline too much. People like me that heard the reviews ahead of time, and I don't always just trust reviews, but when it was confirmed that yes, here's the storyline, April O'Neil, young black lady going to, in high school. I thought, man, this is like completely like this is not outside of the turtles being in the movie. This is not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is something completely different. And again, nothing necessarily wrong with telling a different story. And it appears the movie actually did good. What my critiques in mind, my critique stands. Those are the reasons I did not think it was a great movie, but it wasn't terrible. And it is enjoyable. Or let me put it this way. I can see how to a normal person that is not a geek, not involved in geek culture, doesn't really care less, they would have enjoyed this movie thoroughly. And I think many people did. There are children who did not grow up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this was probably a movie they enjoyed thoroughly. And I think that's sometimes the balance that you have to understand. And I think that's the delicate dance that some of these studios, I say delicate dance, but I think it's a huge gamble they don't need to take. There was no need to change anything about the Turtles' origin. And I'll go one further. You don't always have to retell the origin story of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or any IP for that matter. When you do a movie or a cartoon, this is such an iconic cartoon. Everybody knows about the ooze. Everybody knows that this mutagen is how the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles became what they are. I don't think you necessarily need to tell that story over again. You just could have jumped into a cool Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles story that everybody enjoyed. But I get it, telling the origin story, trying to start out. That's my review. A person who grew up on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, this wasn't my cup of tea, but it on its own, without any of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles history, this was a good movie. With the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles history, not so much, because too many things were changed. And that's my view. That's what I think.